Yeah. So I mean, to me, a lot of the type of talk about reparations, it always seems to talk about slavery as if, like I said, slavery was just it. And that's the issue I have with it. Because, again, America into the modern day has done lots of things through its government. And look, I've never been somebody who disparages the Native Americans. I know there were Native American tribes who owned uh, slaves. There were black people owned slaves, and there were black people killed Native Americans. I've never disparaged them. What America has done to them deserves its own examination. But for right now, talking about us, it's been a 400-year assault on our rights, on our families, our ability to build wealth in this country. It's funny how many people wonder how so many kids in Chicago ended up, in the streets and in gangbanging and drugs, but they don't make that connection to mass incarceration. Where are their fathers? What happened to their older brothers? What happened to their grandfathers now? It'd be their grandfathers and great grandfathers if they were around in the 1970s.
Right.
And so, not to jump too far ahead of myself, but I would like to know where the kids who were just shooting at this West Side.
Oh, yeah, at the
graduation. I want to know where their fathers are. I bet you that their fathers weren't around either, unfortunately. Seriously, but yes, these are things that have to be trifled with. They have to be dealt with, and I'm glad to see that there's definitely this study now. The interim report painted a harrowing picture of the discrimination that was suffered by black people in this country. The U.S. relied on oppressing these people and their descendants in order to prosper, it notes, explaining in astonishing detail how American industries benefited from the enslavement and racist tactics historically and currently that target African American people. Now, a lot of people don't think California played a role in it, but California still plays a role in the discrimination this report added in professional spheres, healthcare, education, housing, home ownership, the environment, mass incarceration, and the legal political systems, and of course, what we've talked about, ad nauseum the last 2 years or so, police brutality. Several recommendations are born out of what the task force called modern slavery in California, or mass incarceration. Those who have been incarcerated should not lose their status as citizens, should be paid a fair market rate for labor, given mental health support, and allowed to maintain trauma-free relationships with family members that visit them. Now, I've always felt like people should not lose their right to vote if they're not currently incarcerated. What about you, Ra?
I agree. I feel like if you've been incarcerated, once you've done your time, then it's like while you're in prison, okay, those rights get suspended, I guess you could say. Not the basic rights of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Well, yeah, liberty, you kind of forfeited that right. But life, you shouldn't lose that. The pursuit of happiness, it should not be totally taken away from you. There's some restrictions would exist, but you still should be able to function, to develop your skills and abilities, so on and so forth. In other words, you should be preparing for the moment when you are released.
Right.
And once you are released, you've paid your debt.
Right.
I mean, when you buy a car on credit, once you make the last payment, do you have to return the car?
No.
All right. Who does it belong to once you made the last payment?
It's yours.
It's yours. You don't have to still send payments after the balance is zero.
Right.
You're not still sending payments to the bank.
Right.
It's done. It's the slate is clear. The same should be with regard to sentencing. Once the sentence is paid, then your slate should be clean. That's not how we do it, of course.
I absolutely agree with that. The task force also recommended providing funding for voter education and outreach for black California residents, creating a genealogical division to help African Americans trace their history, offering free college tuition for every black high school graduate, and legislating mandatory classes from kindergarten through high school on African American history and mandatory cultural training for teachers. Now, see, I think that's where they might fumble the bag.
Yeah.
I think they might fumble the bag because, look, I mean, I definitely think we should all learn black history, but when you get white liberals and the colored people who love them, the sort of sycophant type MSNBC Negroes,
Yeah.
you know they're gonna find a way to put like LGBTQRS stuff in there.
Yep.
They're gonna find a way to like
Shoehorn everything
they're gonna
and everybody
shoehorn
else.
everything. They're gonna make like illegal immigrants. They're gonna somehow make illegal immigration our issue. They're gonna somehow make like that's the way they do everything. And so they use us as a way to push all this other stuff on society that maybe society ain't totally ready for and may never be ready for. You know, me personally. You know, my mother is my mother. I know the difference between my mother and my father. There's never been any confusion there. But now, you know, we're told that the confusion of what makes a man and what makes a woman is somehow connected to the struggle of African Americans.
Yeah. Right. Wrong.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely wrong. But you know, and even in it gets down this whole even the notion that free college education. But see, that trades on another myth that we have bought into. You know, part of the reason why there's such a distinction in wealth between us and whites is that we got suckered into the notion that college is a guaranteed pathway to financial stability.
Yep.
That it doesn't really matter what you do in college. It's just that you go to college.
Yep.
That in and of itself will translate. And so if you couple that to the notion, okay, well, you go to college, and then, well, as long as I'm there, I'm taking things that are interesting to me, and I can put those two together, and I'm on the yellow brick road.
Right.
And you couple that with the fact that there are some degrees that represent special skills, unique skills. Skills that are valuable.
Yep.
There are other degrees that are the exact opposite. They are a dime a dozen.
Yep.
You know, a degree in one of the hard sciences, that might be on the level of a talent. A degree in specialist history studies.
Yep. Gender studies.
Yeah, all that stuff. Dime a dozen.
Right.
Can't do jack with that.
Humanities or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is those kind of degrees, unless you're going to use that degree to parlay that to a master's degree in the same subject, to parlay that to a PhD in the same subject, so you can go teach at a university.
Right.
Until recently, there was no money in ethnic studies.
Right.
Then came CRT. And some people found a way to couple Marxism and ethnic studies or ism studies and white guilt and find a jackpot.
Ibrahim, I think his name Ibrahim X Kendall. Or
yeah,
that guy. And I forget what the woman's name is, the white woman.
Yeah,
Robin DiAngelo.
Yeah, white fragility.
White fragility. Like I said, that type of stuff, I think, in the long run, ends up doing more harm than good. I think that stuff, and we're seeing sort of a pendulum shift back against it. That stuff does more harm than good because, again, it's more about pushing a liberal, a liberal ideology more so than actually dealing with the reckoning of slavery and colonialism and the two-tiered legal system, the prison industrial complex, etc. It's almost becomes about programming people, and people rebel. Like we're starting to see a world now where people are rebelling. We see how we talked about last week how now people are going to rebel against Me Too.
Yeah,
which we saw happening. We're seeing that with Johnny Depp, the end of Me Too. When it feels like you're sort of programming people, when you're pushing an agenda that's more so about trying to get over on people as opposed to actually addressing the issues, people don't take that well.
Yeah.
And like for a little while they might go along with it. I don't think they're going to be going along with a lot of this stuff. And
Well, they're already starting to push back on
and
it.
unfortunately, because of the sort of dishonesty of some of the organization of Black Lives Matter and some of these people who want to talk have real issues about racism, about slavery, about Reconstruction, and about like how the civil rights movement was subverted by the U.S. government, COINTELPRO, and all these things like that. A lot of those people now will be lumped in with Robin DiAngelo and Nicole Hannah-Jones or something, unfortunately, and then it'll be open season. It'll be open season on us again, like it's 1955 or something, because again, you had people who were more about the hustle, than they were about actual justice.
Well, it's just like I was having a conversation with someone today, talking about the Gary Christian community, my Lutheran mission, and the way the church is perceived in Gary, and relating it to our recent activities with regard to the Gary Community School Corporation. And when the idea was thrown out there, well, the black preachers ought to get together and underwrite the bus, based on the notion that, well, the black preachers were the prime agents to push through the referendum, to convince people to vote for the referendum. And one, I wasn't part of that group, although I am a clergyman. I wasn't part of that group. I didn't profit from it. I didn't support it. I did help support sending the bus because I felt that it was important that we go to that meeting. And as an individual, I could support that financially. And so I did. It wasn't either of the two congregations. It wasn't the Lutheran school. It was me personally doing that. Now, but for someone to say I ought to do it, right, because I'm a member of the clergy, well, why should I ought to do it? And it gets down to what I call it. A lot of blacks in this country think that Christian churches are hustles.
Yeah.
They talk about the tax issues, various other issues. It's just a hustle. And it's always acceptable to out-hustle a hustler. Mm-hmm. And so people have no problems going to churches and trying to hustle churches, because they figure they just trying to out-hustle the hustler. Well, I'm not hustling anybody. I don't have no money tree in the backyard. I ain't got no Rolex supplies, no fancy suits. I wear collars and clerical shirts. I don't drive a fancy car. I don't have a fancy house. I'm just an ordinary guy serving two Lutheran congregations in Gary, Indiana. But the problems in this city are not my fault. I'm not going to even say they're the fault of the other pastors in this town, but I will say this. If you adopt the mentality that life is a hustle, that other things in life are, targets for being hustled, and so you hustle government through trying to get these lucrative contracts. You hustle church by, on the one hand, getting people to support your aspirations for wealth based on your connection to God. You hustle entire communities based on these photo op projects. Then eventually people are going to look at you as just another hustler.
Right.
All right. And so these people that are involved in this whole pressing the notion of wokeness, and you name some of these names, they're producing a product that, one, I don't see any positive outcome to it. I don't see a scenario whereby wokeness leads to America becoming the place where you literally are one body because you share a belief in an idea. Because that's really all that America is. We don't share bloodline. We don't share common language. We don't share any sort of familial connection as a nation. The only connection we all have is to the idea expressed in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And someone had called earlier today saying we shouldn't support the 4th of July, we shouldn't celebrate it because when the 4th of July, when the Declaration of Independence was written, black folks weren't even considered to have that apply to them. And he was right about the fact that the words of the Declaration were not thought to apply to slaves. In fact, there was a whole lot of bickering about that point. Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration, wrote words that could be easily construed as attacking slavery itself, and his Southern colleagues had serious problems with those words, and so they watered it down. Ironically, Jefferson himself owned slaves, and yet somehow he could compartmentalize the notion that every human being has certain rights with the fact that he himself profited off the abridgment of those rights to several of his household staff.
Right.
That just shows what a great capacity we humans have for hypocrisy.
Yeah. Cognitive dissonance.
Yes.
I absolutely agree. But yes, we're going to make sure that on this show, whenever there are new developments on stuff like reparations, we will talk about it because it's important to deal with the long standing racial wealth gap.
Yeah.
But right now, Rev,
I wonder how do we get to the place where there are no race-based barriers? What's the path to there?
Well, I definitely think reparations is part of it.
I do too. If only because there's got to be some way of giving blacks the economic tools to be able to do the things that wealth enables you to do. And in order to be able to do that, you have to have the wealth.
Yeah.
There's no sidestepping that. You know, even if the first white Europeans that came to these shores were broke and were dependent upon whatever they could make the land produce for them, still, once they were able to get a foothold established and to be able to develop, it would just take time. And like you said earlier, when blacks got freed from slavery, they were on the same pathway. They were moving right along. Capitalism was doing what capitalism was supposed to do, and it was working for them. And then the artificial break of racism upended that. Remove racism, and we can do anything anybody else can do.
Right.
Add racism, and we have to run twice as fast, jump twice as high, push twice as hard. Absolutely. And still we were able to do it.
Right. It's a testament to how strong our people were that we're still here, that we are still here and able to survive and thrive at this point in 2022. Hold on, caller. We gotta do happy happies.